You're listening to the Sketchnote Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Rohde, the author of the Sketchnote Handbook and the Sketchnote Workbook, and this is the podcast where I chat with sketchnoters and visual thinkers and try to understand what makes them tick. Hey everyone, it's Mike Rohde, and I'm here again for another episode, and I'm with my friend Georgina Dean. Georgina, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. It's been like a milestone for me, and I was just so honored when you invited me on. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. You've sort of made your mark in the community for sure. I think back, it was probably about 2 years ago, maybe a little more, when we sort of crossed paths, and you were really fascinated by this space. And I know that you came to San Antonio. Is that right? Do I remember you came to San Antonio? That is kind of where we really kind of crossed paths and had a chance to chat and get to know each other. And of course, you were involved in the Birmingham event last year. And you've just really accelerated and been really active in I think you just found the community suited you, and you just sort of stepped right in, which was really impressed with. And I think you had a really unique voice and perspective, and wanted to have you on the show. I'm always looking for interesting people. If I can find someone who's kind of at the edges of where things are at, that's really interesting because, that's likely a chance we're going to go there. So, welcome. And, with every episode, let's start with who you are and what you do.
The big question, right? So, I am Canadian, and I'm currently living and working in the UK, and I have been traveling around the world for the last plus 20 years. So left Canada in just over 20 years ago, and Cairo, Egypt was my first stop, and I got the travel bug. I was an educator. Once an educator, always an educator. So we can still say, still a teacher kind of thing. But been traveling around the world for plus 20 years, different countries around North America, Africa, the Middle East. And COVID hit, and that's really been a huge turning point, as it's been for a lot of people, both in terms of bringing me here now to the UK, but also in terms of sketchnoting, live scribing, graphic recording, all of those fun terms. So yeah, I've been working as an educator, teaching primary, elementary school, as well as high school. I've had the privilege and honor of working across the Canadian, the American, and the British curriculum. And then about plus 10 years ago, when Apple introduced the iPads, this was a really big game changer in K-12 education because it really helped us to personalize learning for students. And I joined an American school in Monterrey, Mexico, and they had just got the first sets of iPads. And so there was a whole exploration and experimentation of how we could set up group work across the classroom, helping students take on leadership roles and really moving learning through experiences rather than this rote approach to traditional industrialized education as we know it from decades ago. So that's really what got me into the tech side, I guess we could say. And then I took that back to Africa to help schools with their digital transformation. So the last plus 10 years or so, I've been working as an administrator, senior leader, working with teachers to learn how to integrate technology in a meaningfully pedagogical way with their students. That means not giving the iPad to say, go watch Netflix if you finish your worksheet early. No, it's about what tools could we pick up on the iPad to help you engage with content through your curiosities and through the questions you have. How can you demonstrate your knowledge and skills for what you're learning through an app or through recording your voice or creating a video? And so it's really experimenting with multimodal cross-media platforms to engage all learners, because we all learn in different ways and at different speeds and rates. So technology really provided this accessibility, which is really important to myself, both as an educator, a human, and now a business owner. And so that's really what got everything going. And then COVID hit. We were in Jordan in the Middle East at that time. And I was really busy, as you can imagine, being the digital transformation leader at the school, helping everybody get online, the parents, the the teachers, the students, etc. But during the downtime, since we were in lockdown and in Jordan, you couldn't leave the house for several months. So we really were like locked in the house for quite a while. I found a uh, educational conference that was online through X, formerly known as Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And I joined, and there was a graphic recorder slash sketchnote artist. You probably heard of her, maybe not, Jen Giffen from Canada.
Yes, I know Jen. Yep.
Virtual GIF, yeah. And she was sketchnoting the sessions from this online conference. And I was so taken aback by the visuals. And I just thought, this is amazing. This is like a one-stop shop, but with visual notes. And I'm really into colors. And at that point in time, I would recall how I learned when I was in school as a teenager, with highlighters and trying to get all my notes to study for an exam on one piece of lined paper, A4, and getting the colors out, right? And then here she'd presented this beautiful canvas, single page with no lines, but I found my eyes and my mind just naturally navigating through the containers and the arrows and the connectors that she had. And I found myself having this synopsis of this conference webinar. And I was like, oh my goodness, I want to try this. This is so cool. So I fell in love with sketchnoting, and I guess I'm getting in a little bit into my origin story now. So maybe, do you want me to just
Yeah,
continue
just
with where
transition
I'm
right
going?
in. Mm-hmm.
Transition?
Yep.
Okay. So I wanted to, being an educator, sorry, let me just backtrack for 1 second. Being an educator, part of pedagogy is understanding metacognition as well. And it talks about how we learn, right? Not just learning something, but how is that process of learning? And so retrieval practice is how we're able to go from our short-term memory into our long-term memory to access information over a period of time. And our five senses can help us to do that. So often you may find yourself, you too, Mike, like you came across a smell and you had a flood of memories from when you were a kid, or you tasted a piece of food that your mom or your dad used to cook for you when you were little, or you listened to a piece of music and it reminded you of X experience, right? And so talking about our senses and textures and everything help us also to recall information that is retained really quickly and flood your memory with all of the things around that experience. So visual is another one of those things, right? And so there's a lot of evidence. I don't have like all the percentages at hand to say, but I'm sure we can all imagine together that it's an increased percentage of people that can retrieve information by both annotating it, right? Images and text on paper, as well as then using images to recall that information. What I found really interesting across my time, I really want this to be a conversation though. I feel like I should pause and let you like hop in on
Mm.
something. So I think I'm just going to pause there.
Well, it's fascinating. One thing that popped into my mind is for those who are not educators, and I've worked in the education space, and I'm still not sure, what is pedagogy. What's the definition for that?
Oh, really great question. Yeah, thanks for slowing that down. So pedagogy is basically, there's pedagogy and that's for younger students, and then like teens, etc., and below. And then andragogy is what we call learning for adults. So pedagogy is the study of learning. So
Okay.
when I went to university to become a teacher in Canada, for example, at the University of Ottawa. It was a concurrent program at the time. I don't think they offer it now, but basically where um, the program of study that I took, which was second language French teaching, I'm bilingual,
Mm-hmm.
was also my educational degree. And so when I finally took my Bachelor of Education, it ended up being the master's for my program. It's what we call a concurrent system. But basically, you have a set of pedagogy, which is learning and teaching how to teach children and then how
Mm-hmm.
children learn. And then based on your subject, you have all the subject material. So since mine was language learning, I had like syntax and phonics and all sorts of literacy, like all sorts of things. You also have a bit of psychology because we need to learn also the developmental stages for children if we're going to be teaching
Right.
young people as well. So there's a lot of different things, but the pedagogy is really looking at how we learn and how we teach and that circle.
Interesting. Okay, that's helpful. The other thing that was interesting in what you talked about there was this idea that the retention percentage when you do drawing and annotation, which I've long believed. I think I've seen some studies. I suspect there's probably more now. Um, but I kind of instinctively knew that by doing it, that this was helping me remember. So I've kind of made the stretch jump that's likely that it's helping other people too, if they're able to do this. And especially when I realized, well, if students are also benefiting from this, it seems natural that I should go in as much as I can to education, which, honestly, it's funny. When I wrote the Sketchnote handbook, we really did not have educators as a target market or a space that we thought about. We really focused on design professionals because I was a design professional. It made sense that other designers are likely the ones that are going to buy the book. And so we had to pick something, and that's all we really knew at the time. But what was interesting after a couple of years, the handbook and sketchnoting in general seemed to really have this takeoff moment in the education space. I saw it mostly in the US because that's where I'm located, but it seems like it's gone worldwide really and has had a really positive impact. So we suddenly saw this second wind of educators buying the book and like realizing like, hey, if my kids can retain more and they have fun
Mm.
drawing at the same time, like this is a double win. Teachers are always looking for ways that help their students learn and help them remember. So it was a natural fit. And I think from ever since it's been definitely involved in education space to different degrees based on where, but I always found that as like one of my proudest moments, like, okay, this is being used to help kids learn better and to think better and remember better. That's pretty cool. And I was really proud of that, even though, like I said, we didn't plan on it. It was really an accidental thing or just a happenstance, but was really happy that that happened. So
Such a great feeling to know you're giving back, right? To like a
yeah, exactly.
huge community and like the future of the world. It's
Yeah.
great. Really, congratulations to you. Yeah. It's a huge
Yeah.
win.
So that's exciting to hear that there are studies that are proving that to be true and that it's helpful. So anyway, now
And
that
I
we've
would
taken our
even
little,
say,
go ahead.
no, just to add a little point onto that as well. I would even say that there are newer studies now. If I can locate them, I'll send them to you to add in the
Hmm.
podcast episode if you want at the
Okay.
show notes. But there's some new research being done and a couple that have been done on the difference between annotating on paper and that
Uh,
very, right, like the texture, the holding the
yeah.
pencil
Yeah.
on paper and holding an Apple Pencil on an iPad. And there's that little added percentage of it even goes deeper if it's an actual pencil and an actual piece of paper. So then we
Mm,
have other companies like Paperlike, for example, that came out
right.
with screen covers that actually feel like paper. I personally use it and that helps a
Hmm.
lot as well.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that research has been done. And if anybody knows, feel free to comment on this episode. But if there's research been done on adults and after we've gone through schooling, in our generation of learning with paper and pencil, is there an actual difference going to the iPad now, or have we
Mm,
already, integrated and ingrained those skills? But I think for children, there is a lot, like young children, I'm talking like below the age of 10, below puberty, there's a huge amount of research around them being able to use the pencil, even just for fine motor skills. That's also part of
mm,
the development, through Piaget and the developmental stages. It's important even for fine motor skills to get that as well. I think the other thing is there's just such an important thing of balance. And I know we were chatting a little bit about our AI experiences together a little bit before, but it's that idea of balancing tech, balancing art, and it's also between the analog and the digital, right? And
hmm
so I think there's an importance of we need to find a balance that allows children to be able to continue being curious, continue imagining. That's going to require reading and having experiences in life that they're wondering about, right? So, curiosity, imagination, and having experiences where they can create with so many different things. There's a reason in elementary classrooms, I think that's called kindergarten in North America, if I remember
Yes.
correctly,
Yeah.
and potentially pre nursery school, maybe I think it's called over there, where they have sandboxes and water tubs that
Mm,
they can play in.
yes.
And it's interesting how that term translates. I was going to write a Substack post about this actually in June. Sandbox translates from that age, 3 to 5 years of age, into tech product lines, right? And so they call it in the tech industry, in terms of product, the sandbox. And it's where you
Hmm.
have, I'm sure you know that as a techie too, Mike, is that area where it's a part of the app, but it's a safe space where you can play and
Yes.
make mistakes because it's not going to impact your actual product or your data or anything like that. So,
Hmm.
so I find it interesting, this idea of play and how that translates through time and through different subjects and through different workspaces. I forgot where I was saying all of that, but mostly just the importance of balancing between play, analog, digital, and just having, not overdoing it on any part of life or work, just having a bit of everything. It's kind of like a mashup of all sorts of important ingredients, a bit like the food pyramid, right? You want to have a little bit of
Hmm.
everything and not overdo any single one. What do you
Right.
think?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting. Like, I've had this theory about younger generations. My son is 23, and he's really fascinated by vinyl records. Now, I've had a record player for a while, so he bought himself a turntable, and he's really fascinated by Def Leppard of all bands. So he plays his
Wow.
Def Leppard records on his vinyl record player and really enjoys that experience. He's very much into cars, but he's not interested in new cars. He's interested in old 80s cars. So he has two 1984 cars, which the reason he likes them is that they're simple enough that he can work on them, and he tunes them and updates them and fixes them when they break. But he can do it, right? Like, he really resisted becoming a mechanic of like chips and computer systems because he felt like you're just sort of like hunting in the dark, or, it's not what he wanted. But so he's now has become, as of this recording, he's an apprentice mechanic at a company that focuses on older, you know, German cars. So he's getting to do what he loves, and it's a very physical job, which is, oddly enough, I'm exposing a lot about my son, but he used to hate barbecue ribs because his hands got messy. He would actually eat barbecue ribs with napkins because he didn't like the feeling of being messy. And now here he is years later, getting all greasy and fixing cars and loving it. So, but that's all to say, like, there is an aspect of everyone, I guess, to different degrees, that we as people, we're physical beings, right? We touch things and we need that tactile experience. And I think sometimes when you veer away from that a lot, it can have an impact on your reaction to things. And the reason I talk about this theory that young people are coming back to analog things is their default is digital. You think
Mm,
Gen Z to Gen Alpha and whatever is after that, like, everything is like by default is digital. And so they have to seek out analog. For me, I'm older, so I grew up pre-digital, right? So for me, the exciting thing was all the digital stuff. And it's almost like the pendulum is flipped the other way, where the sort of the edgy stuff is like the analog stuff, like Polaroid cameras. I have a nephew who loves Polaroid cameras,
yeah.
and my son likes vinyl records and old cars, and my other son, he likes drawing with a pencil and making comic books with me. So, it's interesting to see, like, how humans, the, I guess, the tactile part of things is important. And, even the fact that paper like produces a screen protector, which I also use because I like it, sort of says something about the slickness and the smoothness of that iPad screen is problematic. I mean, there's some people that don't use that, surely. Um, but there is something about trying to get back to, that feel, like the Remarkable tablet. I know some friends use those, right?
Mm,
Because it has a very paper-like feel. You feel the feedback. Really, it's the feedback of the tip running on that
yeah.
surface is a lot like pencil on paper, right? You get a little bit of texture, and it's it reinforces the realness of what you're doing, right? So
Mm.
I don't know where that whole thing went, but I just have this perception that young people, and maybe this is a human thing, people in general, humans in general, need that tactile feedback. We're physical beings. Like, not everything can be in your head or on a screen or in your eyes. We need touch and feel. That's an aspect of being human that's important. And I think maybe technical, people doing software maybe don't really appreciate that as much as maybe could be, right? I don't know where that is all going, but that's just my running theory as of late.
It's interesting you said that, Mike, because I work remotely from home now, so I'm not in the classroom anymore. Just to finish that loop, I went out on my own a couple years ago and I sort of do a little bit of consulting for schools or corporations and help them with their tech stacks and their digital transformation. But equally, I'm building out my visual thinking practice, right? And so that leads me here. But on the last thing you said, so my husband and I both work remotely from home, and he has been working remotely for a decade. And during our next move, which will be back to North America in the coming couple of years, he's looking forward to actually going back to the office. It won't be 5 days a week, but he'll be able
Mm-hmm.
to go in a couple days and then work from home a couple days. And just the other day, he was saying to me, I've been sitting at my desk 5 days a week for 10 years. I can't wait to be back. And so I think I do believe that it's not just a return to analog. I believe it's a return to humanity. And one thing, however, that being said, that I would like to reiterate, because like you said, it's a pendulum, and as a human society, I've observed, at least in my short lifespan, that we tend to go from one extreme to another on that pendulum, right? And what I believe is going to be really important, again, is the balance. If we go solely back to analog, are we really setting children up for the success they need without the skills they will need to
Mm-hmm.
thrive in an AI fronted, tech fronted world? So I'm not saying I have the answer, and I don't believe anybody does yet. We're all in exploratory mode right now. And I do believe these are just important questions that we want to think about. How can we help children, for example, have the the um, the childhood learning experiences we had, which were jumping in puddles in our Wellington boots, building snow igloos and
Mm-hmm.
forts in the Canadian backyards in the
Yeah.
winter, video games until 3 a.m. at Christmas, but then spending all day on the sled hills or skiing the next day, having that balance and still helping them to understand, hey, how can we solve really big problems in the world using technology and global collaborations, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
climate or getting to Mars or building whatever it is, right? Sustainability. So I do believe balance will be important, and it won't be because we've decided to shut down the tech because
Right.
it's doing harm. And it won't be because we've decided to stop having those childhood experiences. I do believe we need balance there.
Yeah, an equilibrium makes sense to me. And I think I was just thinking as you were chatting, like, think back to the 70s when I was a little kid, like everything was analog, even up into the 80s and into the early 90s. There was a lot still analog. If you watch old movies from the 90s, you can see, like, when Harry Met Sally, Tom Hanks is on this phone with a long cord so he can walk around his
Right?
apartment, right? It was even pre, like, wireless phones that were in your home, right? Not even wireless homes in your pocket. And so, like, think about the impact that digital had on the culture, and the culture is sort of adapted to it, and maybe it's springing back, and it's trying to find its equilibrium where, like you said, these things can coexist, right? The going on the sledding hill and in the morning, and then coming in the afternoon and playing video games after, with hot chocolate or something, right? I agree with you. This sort of a moderate in between where you appreciate all those things in their context and in their right time, and not overwhelm one or the other by going all analog, like living in a cabin in the woods, which I guess you could do. But I mean, that's one perspective. Or going all digital where you never leave your house and, you just DoorDash everything. Like, that's not maybe so healthy. Probably the downside of going into the log cabin is, like, you lose the social connection of people. right? So like finding that balance and where those things fit seems to make sense for most people. And then,
Mm,
that maybe that's, it just feels like maybe the impact of digital stuff has been so strong that
mm.
it's the swing back will come back to analog, and then eventually it's going to settle in somewhere in the middle. Maybe, I don't know.
I think
We're
also
just
it's
speculating.
no, absolutely. And it's a fascinating conversation. I'm really enjoying chatting to you about it. And I should say not but, and I do believe another aspect is also how is culture and how are we supporting, how are these big tech companies supporting adults and families as they are integrating these new tech tools in. So, for example, um, just off the top of my head, let's say X company launches this application. Well, what videos and what let's say documentation are they giving to parents to help them with a
Mm,
step by step of this is how you set up parental controls with this
hmm.
application. This is how your data is being used with this application. And I don't mean a 50-page terms of service. I mean, how are tech companies creating digestible content for parents and schools and teachers to be able to set up to help them manage in that balanced way, right? In the family ecosystem. And I wonder, again, I don't have the answers, I'm not the expert, but in my observation, helping families and schools around the world the last decade is what could be done better to help those people because I do believe that's where a great divide has occurred, where parents have had to fend for themselves, not knowing how
Yes.
to set up the tech. And this really came out in the COVID times, in my observation, was that they didn't know how to, set up password systems on their routers, like kids, how do we turn off cameras? How do we, like all of these things to help protect, safeguard children, safeguard themselves, understand where their data is going, all of those things, which this podcast is not about, but it basically just talks to like it's the same with our digital sketchnoting tools to bring us back to visual thinking, right? Like
Hmm.
when everybody downloads things, like I know you're a fan of Concepts, for example, me,
Hmm.
Adobe Fresco. There's a lot of other ones out there. When we have those apps, how do we know what of our data is being used or not? How do we know how to use it? Are there in-app tutorials that help us? What about if the children want to have an account on it? So it's not just about AI, it's not just about Netflix, it's about any technical tool or service that's being fronted. I believe that's a cultural thing, and I believe we all have, um, as digital citizens and citizens of the world, that we have a responsibility to make sure that we understand before we use something. It's like, you wouldn't give your child a kettle without telling them this is the safety issues.
Mm,
You could
yeah.
get
Could
burnt, you
burn
could
yourself.
burn the.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Same with a swimming pool. I often use that in keynote speeches when I'm speaking around the world about the pool. You wouldn't leave your 5-year-old to go swim in a pool if there was no lifeguard there or without the wings. We wouldn't do the same with a tech. You can't just give your 6 or 7-year-old child a device and say, off you go. We need to understand and we need to help people to learn how to manage those things. What are your thoughts on that? Being a parent yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a real challenge. I think you've touched on something. And, if you have a busy life, it's often you deal with the problems when they come up and often don't have the bandwidth at the outset to kind of set things up as much as I try to, there's just some things you can't envision. You try to guide as much as possible and you just deal with things as they occur. So I think and a little bit of it's incumbent on the software and hardware makers to provide that. But I mean, ultimately the tool makers could make all kinds of stuff and parents might choose not to use it, right? So then there's responsibility on the parent side. And so, yeah, it's probably a much deeper topic than we have time to go into, but it's certainly an aspect. And, there's definitely benefits like you keyed in on in our space. It's using the iPad. Like, if I do things personally for myself, I use paper and pen. Um, and I use the iPad, but I think usually for client work, I'll use the iPad because the reason I do is because it allows editability. because the client is typically, oh, you spelled something wrong, or we need to move this over here, or you need to change that. If I do it on pen with paper, I can do that, but then I'm in Photoshop making modifications or redrawing things and integrating. That was the old way. So having the ability to edit that makes sense in a digital tool for a customer situation. So I don't know that I've resolved that question, but it is, I think basically what we're touching on is culturally, there's a lot going on that's maybe is under the surface, and maybe it pops up occasionally, but our lives are a lot more complex. They're better with the digital tools in some ways, and also more complex at the same time. And I think in ways that you think about data breaches and
Mm.
people who, reuse their passwords and get hacked because of it, like just a lack of knowledge and education because of lack of time or just unawareness. So it's a challenge. I don't have an answer for it other than to be as vigilant as you can. But
I think the
um,
great thing about the time period that we're living in now, Mike, for all generations, is that um, I don't believe we're in the era of information anymore. I believe we're in the era of creativity, of innovation. That's what's exciting for me. And to think about, we no longer have to try and learn all the things because information is at our fingertips now. And I feel that now I can actually go and explore and experiment and take risks,
mhm.
and I almost therefore believe it's cycling back to childhood, right? Back to those childhood experiences that we were talking about, because now we're saying, oh, well, now we can sandbox again. Now we can try this because I can just go get those instructions or those steps from a GPT, whichever one I'm using, and use it that way. So I do believe it's an exciting time to be alive because we can just, it's almost like the world is our playground. We just have to make sure that we have the safeguards in place and that we understand all of the risks and can make those decisions together. I think traditionally for the education system, it's difficult for educators who are in our generation because we grew up traditionally, right? That this is an exam, you study for it, you get an A or a B, you're correct or wrong, check marks, X's, etc. And we're now trying to think about how do we rethink and reimagine that system, right? So it's exciting, but visual thinking is one way that I do believe we're going to be able to do that. And anytime I interact with educators, I've had the privilege just last year again of being out in South Africa to teach sketchnoting to educators out in Cape Town. One year I went to Johannesburg, and also at ISTE San Antonio. I was there
Mhm.
for ISC and another conference. I'm going out to Florida again to not San Antonio, to Florida in Orlando
Mhm.
in a couple of weeks, actually. So lots of opportunities to teach sketchnoting, which is really exciting. And the great thing is that teachers love it initially. What I've observed so far is because it is something that they can go back to pen and paper. And so for those people who are in our generation, for example, who are a bit anti-tech still, it's
Mhm.
one skill that they can bring into the classroom where they have that option, right, of using digital or analog. So that's really beautiful. Um, and I know you said you were interested to go into schools and work with teachers. Have you had that opportunity yet, or do you have spaces or places you're looking to work in, specifically elementary or university or high school?
I've
Hey, have you ever wanted to create travel sketch notes from an experience you've had, just using the photos and memories you've got? In the Reflective Travel Workshop video replay, I'll guide you through my process for creating travel sketch notes and then help you reflect on your own photos and memories so that you can make travel sketch notes of your own trips too. This 2-hour recorded video includes a set of downloadable, printable sketching templates and process to kickstart your own travel sketchnoting practice. All this for just $20. Visit rodesign.com/travel to purchase your video and templates today.
I've had opportunities because of my book to work in all those spaces. So I've worked at Drexel
Right.
University. I was able to work with the design department and work through there, and then also primary education and even middle school and high school education. I've been to school districts in the past. It's all pre-pandemic. They would fly me in, and typically I would teach at kind of a gathering, either at the beginning of the season or the end of the season of teaching, and teach the sketchnoting concept. During the pandemic, it switched to online teaching. So I worked with a school district for quite a while in Maryland. We did all kinds of really innovative stuff in teaching there for the teachers. And ultimately the goal was to teach the teachers how it works, the benefits, and then they give them tools and ideas for integration. So there's been a variety of situations that has changed a little bit. And I have a sense that maybe there's more resources for teachers and that they're maybe using it directly. But I also know that teachers are often just trying to keep up with normal life. So it could be that, the complexities of life mean that that's just an aspect of the teaching. I'm sure it is. But, there has definitely been an interest, and that could be something that I pursue more. These days, it would be probably online teaching with those groups. But I'm still open to doing in person. I really enjoyed in-person teaching. There's some dynamic about it that's a little different, and I enjoy the interaction. And I think the impact can often be more when you're physically there and you run through a curriculum across a couple of hours or a whole day. Really has an impact on those teachers to then see like, oh, okay, this is how I could integrate. You're there to kind of answer questions and give ideas, and it's all in context to their situation, which I think is always important. Like general platitudes and ideas are great, but then it puts the burden on the teacher in this case to find ways to apply it in their work lives, right? So the burden is all on them. When I'm able to come in and work with them, I'm asking lots of questions like, what kind of things do you teach? Let's find out ways that we can integrate it. What if we tried this? What if we tried that? And they start seeing, right? So that's a lot of reason I like doing the in-person was for that interaction. I just don't know. I mean, the other challenge with school districts are always struggling for funding. So hiring a guy to come in and teach is always challenging. So there's a lot of different dynamics in it, but my goal is still to be there and available for educators, because I think I've always loved school, and I really like the idea of passing on this skill to the next generation. So it is part of it. I think there are teachers that subscribe to the Sketchnote Lab and get benefit from it there. So that brings me to the idea that maybe Sketchnote Lab could touch on more educational topics in the future. Maybe having you on and we could tag team something that could be fun to do.
I'd love that. That could be so fun. Yeah.
So, because that is my heart is to, I have kids, and I just really like I loved school, and if there's a way I can make school more fun for more kids, that's a win. And ultimately, I think about the other reason I think that way is when I would teach sketchnoting and to adults, they would always come in a little hesitant to draw. So the first thing I had to solve is how do I convince them they can draw simply? So that I would do with the 5 basic shapes. And typically once they would get past that step and realize it's just capturing ideas with these simple objects, by the end of the session, they were really excited and they wanted to use it. And I always thought wow, if I could catch students before they gave up on drawing and teach them this basic way, maybe they would hold on to some aspect of visualization, even if it's a simple one, into their adulthood and make it part of their practice in whatever they're doing. And then it also dovetails into this desire for analog things. Could this be touch on an interest for analog and the drawing as a problem solving tool? All those things in my mind sort of blend together. Could we kind of catch them before they abandon drawing because they weren't as good as John or Mary, right? I think often that's the case. Someone's really good and everybody else well, if I can't be as good as them, I'm going to quit. Or the drive, I think, in a lot of education is toward writing and text. So that's another thing that's kind of leaning away from visualization. So it's, in some sense, there needs to be some intentionality. So my thought was, if I approach education this way, maybe there's an opportunity to instill that in a way that maybe it survives a little bit longer. I feel, and it comes back to my own story, I feel fortunate. I was good enough at drawing, and I was, I guess, stubborn enough to keep doing it when I was told not to, or I ingratiated myself to the teacher so they liked that I drew, and so I drew throughout my whole school career, into college and into work, and it just never left. Like, it was just part of the way I operated. But I think
Mm.
a little bit it was the opportunities were there, and I was stubborn enough to keep doing it anyway. But not everybody's like that, or not everybody has those opportunities. So how can we provide more kids that opportunity to have that experience? Maybe not everybody can, but if we can increase that, that offers them an opportunity to have another thinking tool. That's sort of my thought on ed, and I really enjoy ed. It's just I haven't really pursued it heavily as project work. More than anything, it's just opportunities haven't come directly, and it could be a byproduct of just the way the education
Mm.
system is currently. Maybe, I don't know. I haven't really pursued it to see, like, why have I not got as many educational opportunities as in the past? I'm sure there's some dynamics going on that I'm probably not aware of, but it could also be that I'm not pursuing them too.
I was just going to say, it might just be that you reach out to
Yeah,
a certain amount in your area and then just
yeah,
build from
sure.
there. Or events or things like that. So yeah, it's just something to consider, I think. But
Yeah, for sure.
I, yeah,
And I love teaching. I've found that I really enjoy teaching. It's fun for me. Now I focus on one area, so I, in that sense, like, I feel for what teachers go through, and like the
mm,
challenge of like coming up with even a short curriculum and preparing it and making it engaging and making sure that there's an outcome that's positive and all that stuff. So I kind of appreciate the hard work that they go through because I do it myself. So and that's another aspect too, is just
it's
feeling like part of the crew.
Yeah, it really is difficult for educators right now, especially as I'm sure you've heard in the grapevine. We call this the TikTok era, where the
Mm,
attention
yeah,
spans are really low, and
yeah,
it's really difficult for teachers to maintain the attention and engagement, like authentic, real, genuine engagement of children. And the curriculum that's currently existing doesn't necessarily always help, right? And there are some experimental curriculums out there, and that's going well, but it's not for the average, public school that's out there. And so
yeah,
it's hard. So I appreciate you saying that, and kudos to any educators listening to this episode, and thank you for all you do, for sure. I thought it would be a great opportunity to share one way that I use sketchnoting in the
yeah.
classroom during lockdown, if you're interested.
That'd be great. Yeah, I'd love that.
um, yeah, might be of interest to other educators, just to spark other ideas even for them. So we were all at home in lockdown, and I said, "Oh, I'm going to try this with my year 9." So I think that's like a grade 8 in North
Hmm.
America, I believe.
Yeah.
And I was teaching one class that year for BTech media. So it's like a creative media course. I don't know what the equivalent would be over there, but it's like learning media and the creative tools that go with it. So they had to learn Adobe InDesign for this particular one, or Adobe Illustrator. So I usually give them a choice of tools. Choice of tools and voice is really important. And we met online through the Google Meet, and everybody either had their Chromebook device with them or their Apple iPad. I worked in an international school, so the students had devices with them. And, or they could use pen and paper. So, in order to get them going, I said, right, we're going to do something fun today. We need to learn how to use the tool. So, the objective is like, can you learn to create something in Illustrator or Design, etc., or Fresco? But we want to do this in a cross curricular way where we're picking up another objective or outcome, as you call it. So, um, what is the topic that we want to do? So we took the free wheel picker, and I'll send you the link to put in the show notes if for anybody wants to use this in business or in a classroom. So it's a wheel, and you click spin on your computer and it spins. So it just, I think you saw me use it at ISC for the free prize
Yes.
giveaway that one
Yeah.
year. So it's that. And I used that, and the students were putting in the Google chat comments, for the Google Meet comments, their ideas. So we put in all the ideas of the topics they wanted to do. And there was one topic that went into the wheel. And as the facilitator of that learning experience, I was like, oh gosh, if this ends up on this topic, I don't know what I'm going to do. So guess what topic we landed on, right?
Of course.
So the topic was anime. It was not a bad topic, nothing wrong with it, just
It's
one
just
that I
out of your
have no
purview. Yeah.
No experience. I mean, I just knew, and forgive my ignorance, obviously still, still haven't learned that much about it, but
Hmm.
anime for me at that moment was just like a cartoon, right? Like I didn't know anything about it. So the kids went berserk on the Google Meet and I was like, oh, okay. The work that came out of that class, like wowed educators at my
Mm.
school. It was incredible. So the goal was, can you draw this on analog? And then can you replicate it using a digital tool? So the lesson was a project with the main outcome of, can you produce something using this tool for creative media, right? But we
Hmm.
learned all these other skills. We balanced analog and we balanced digital. Then we had a gallery walk using a Google slideshow. So each student had a Google slide and they could celebrate. Then there was peer feedback in the comment section of the slide. So it was a whole pedagogically sound learning activity, but we had so many modalities, even though we were online at home, right? So that we posted. And when I do sometimes keynotes, I include pieces of that work, obviously with permission granted years ago for that,
Sure, sure.
to help educators, etc. And they would post the pictures, and the illustration work coming out of these grade 8s, year 9s was absolutely astounding. And what's even better than what came out of like Adobe Illustrator, and I had to leave it open because some students weren't able to use the Adobe tools on their Chromebooks at home who
Yeah.
didn't have
Yep.
iPads. So they were using things like Google Draw. Oh my goodness. An image that came through on a Google Draw, like completely blew my mind, like
Wow.
completely blew my mind. And it just goes back to show you don't have to have the most expensive tool out there to be creative. And you don't have to have the most expensive tool to have high quality work,
Hmm.
in my humble opinion. Yes, there's quality in print and resolution, and I get that. But what this lesson taught me as a facilitator and educator of many years, and taught other teachers and students in our school, was that wow, you just never know until you try, right? Like to take that first step. Um, so it ended up being this really beautiful project. Their artwork was displayed, some of them they have to create a portfolio to go to universities at the end. And so they included that project. But, the fact that we were in a Google Meet with a wheel spinner and then different tools, some people used the Google AI tool where you draw the shape and then AI can tell you what the shape is.
Yeah.
I'll try and get you the links for all the stuff once we get the transcript so that people can have access to these
Hmm.
online freebies. But yeah, the sky's the limit. It was a beautiful lesson, one I'll never forget.
Mm. Wow, that's really fun. And it's funny that the thing you thought like, oh, I hope they don't pick this one. You knew that was going to get picked, right? You just
Right.
had that feeling. And then the second thing that I find really interesting is how the kids got excited. So like, I think if you can, I've always said like when I'm teaching people they want to learn how to sketch, and it's like find a hobby that you really enjoy and then integrate it with it, like do them together, because it's more likely if you love gardening and you plan your garden with a sketch note, you're likely going to do those both because one helps the other one, right? You want to learn sketchnoting, you're already a gardener. Like, oh wow, I didn't think about, I could sketch out 3 different ways and move stuff around and like envision it before I plant anything, right? Like, and it's so like this overlap of passion with activity is always really important because that's a
I'm really
fuel that keeps you going, right?
sorry to interrupt you.
Go
You
ahead.
you sparked me, Mike, and you
Hmm.
reminded me about that. You're correct about matching things, and there are other parts of lessons from those units too that you're helping me to recall right now. So, for example, icon boarding, and so creating a story or a sentence with just 4 icons, and when you
Mm,
add them together, like what does that story reveal? Also, developing our own icons, and then how can you
mm.
use those icons to tell a story, comic strips. So if students were creating videos, part of their first one was what's that called? The strip of the video. There's a
Oh,
word
like
for it.
yeah, I know what you're talking about. Storyboard. Is that
Storyboard.
it?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So what's interesting is that there are uh, digital applications that we gave to our students to use after vetting, obviously, for like storyboard literally.org or something like that.
Mhm.
But equally, we had them do it on paper and
Yeah.
using Sketchnote to support that, right? And comics and all the rest. So there are so many different projects you can do with students to logo work, and what does that mean about capitalism, and you can tie it into history and math and
Mm.
English, and it's such a beautiful thing, and it really does help the memory retention and recall. So yeah,
Mm.
highly recommend it.
That's really interesting. The other thing that comes to mind now that we've been talking about this, I did some work uh, with a company that did project-based learning. They needed now my intersection with that was they needed an illustration to communicate. So the challenge they faced was their salespeople primarily would go out to school districts and try to explain what is project-based learning, and they kind of knew what it was, but like, how do we support you as a company? And they were having trouble because it was such a holistic process that what we ended up with doing was, well, why don't we just draw a map of what the process looks like in a typical cycle? Like, what do you get, and who did it impact? So I think I'd have it on Flickr, but basically there's these different groups. There's administrators, there's teachers, and then there was another party, and like we showed like how the company integrated. Anyway, it brought to mind when I learned about project-based learning as part of that project that I just love that idea of project-based learning, because I realized that is how I learn best. Me, I don't know if everybody's that way, but usually like I have a goal. I want to try and do this thing, and I will like bang my head against the wall to figure out software or solve the problem to achieve a goal. Like, just learning for learning is not that, you know, helpful for me, right? Because it's just like, well, and I think the other thing too is the way I learn, and again, this just might be me, is I like to read a little bit about like the concept and like, okay, I think I understand it, and then apply it, like physically apply it or do something and say, oh, okay, that's how that's working. Then I go back to the text and like, okay, now I understand that. Let's go to the next thing. And I start building it by going back and forth between, the theory and the practical. Like, I've always, like, in everything I do, I try to have theory and practical, right? In both. So I'm kind of curious, can you touch on a little bit project-based learning? Is that a big movement in education? I have a sense that it was to some degree, but I think
Oh,
it's, that's probably the counter to a traditional industrial type education, I would think, right?
absolutely. And project-based learning, I would say, really heightened, especially as I mentioned, when the iPads came out, because
Okay.
they had the ability then to do group work. And students could do a lot more with it. You don't have to have digital devices to do
Hmm.
project-based learning.
Sure.
So I just
Yeah.
want to be clear with that. But it facilitated ease of that,
Hmm.
and where students could access things online and then facilitate small groups, right? And so
I see.
it facilitated the ease, productivity, and efficiency, and collaboration, mostly creative collaboration.
Hmm.
But I will say, and what sparked with that, with what you were saying, was this idea of creative friction and struggle in creative problem solving, right? Critical thinking and problem solving, is this idea. At least today, we're seeing that right now in education and classrooms. Is, yes, we're trying to move away from industrialized approaches of rote learning in rows into project-based learning. But like you said, with an intentional purpose of how that ties into the real world. Because what we don't want, we can't afford, I do believe we cannot afford anymore, is students graduating from school. And as you said, they are not able to apply what they've learned in the
Yeah.
classroom to
It's all
help
theory.
them to thrive as a citizen in their community. We don't have the luxury of not helping that to come to fruition anymore. So project-based learning will actually help that. So if you have a specific interest in X, then we can tailor that. And I know a lot of schools are trying different alternative methods. There's like the Montessori schools. I don't know if you've heard of
Mhm.
those before.
Yep.
It's not really based on your age, or it's based on your interest and your skills, and you're grouped with kids of different ages. There are independent schools, private schools, public schools. There's a whole slew of them. And hopefully the goal, I do hope, is that everybody's just trying to help kids get to the best of it. But the more you can allow students to work in groups, you're helping them to learn how to collaborate so that we don't lose the art of communication in this
Mm-hmm.
age of tech and AI.
Mm-hmm.
You're helping them to learn how to coexist in uncomfortable situations when you disagree with people in your group, and how do you work through that. So to build the strategies of being able to communicate and collaborate, you are building the ability to recognize and create what I like to call be brave spaces. Some people call them safe spaces, but being culturally responsive, I prefer to call them be brave spaces,
I like that.
where we include others and we respect everybody. So an inclusive space. I guess the other thing we want to say as far as learning and pedagogy go with project-based learning is that if you scaffold is being able to set up the learning goal success criteria in levels. So for
Okay.
somebody who is maybe a little bit more advanced, you can offer this entry level to the project.
Okay.
Somebody who knows very little with very little skill can start at the beginning of that
Mm-hmm.
scaffolding. And someone who's got a lot of background experience, maybe just moved from another country or a little bit older, whatever the case is, they can enter this. So you've got tiers of learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we call scaffolding in pedagogy. And the idea in the project-based learning is that the teacher could easily set a Google Drive folder with that, beginning, medium, advanced, obviously with more interesting terms than those, but just to give you the basic idea of the setup, into a Google Classroom or into a Teams classroom. And then students could go in and pick, like, oh, now that I've discussed this problem, now that we've sketchnoted and mapped out some possible scenarios, now that we've circled where the problem points are, now I'm ready to go in and do the independent part of that
Mm-hmm.
project-based learning. And they can go and grab the activity that matches their skill level, right? And so each child has agency and ownership of their learning. Did that make sense, or did I go a
Yeah.
little bit far on that?
No, I think that's great. I think you put it in layman's terms as well. I'm sure educators will know all these terms and be following right with you, but I think it's always helpful to know not everyone who listens or watches is an educator, but I think you've explained it. I could relate to it pretty clearly. And as I look back, like the times when I've really made advances in my learning has been project based. I had to do something, figure it out. And I'm trying to instill that with my son, who's still 13, and talking with him about this having during the summer, drawing hour and coding hour and like doing stuff where we like not just like fooling around to mess around, but to have a purpose. Because I think, you end up with a result and you can see like, okay, I did all this learning to do a comic book, or I did all this learning and we built a website, or, that kind of having an endpoint and maybe not a physical thing, but an object or something that was built as a result of the learning. So the learning becomes your way to that thing, because that's reality, right? Like in my
Yeah.
day job, like I have to do something and I might not know a software tool very well. So I have to figure it out. Like I usually am doing it in context with a project that I have to get done. And so, it challenges me to go watch YouTube videos or read manuals and then experiment until we can, okay, I get what's going on. Now let's use it. So that's probably closest to reality, right? In life, we have projects and we learn as a process toward getting the project completed. Or
It's so
maybe you know,
It's so true. And I'm so glad you said that. Just yesterday or the day before yesterday, I had to return something to Amazon. And normally nowadays, I don't know how it is in North America, but here in the UK, you can just show the QR code and they can scan it and return your parcel. But it was a different courier, like in every courier that had to pick it up, and I had to print a label. Anyway, so we didn't have a printer at home because we're mostly digital. So we ordered this cheap printer to have at home. And it took me like almost 3 hours to set up. And anybody listening to this who's like, what, she's a digital transformationist and she can't set up her printer except in 3 hours. It does sound funny, but hear me out. So turns out we had, router issues. It was, so not to bore everybody with that, but I know that probably resonates with you, Mike, as a techie, but like the router was the reason it wasn't picking up the software through the Wi-Fi connection when we connected it in the back end. Anyway, long story short, I struggled, I got frustrated, and I was tempted several times to open my GPT and ask for the instructions. Now, this is a really interesting example. I chose not to because I was determined that I had enough intelligence to do this by myself as a techie, right? So I spent all the time, and finally after 3 hours, I knocked on my husband's office door and I was like, I'm really stuck. I can't figure this out. Anyway, he come over and he couldn't figure it out either. Then I felt much better because he's an actual engineer.
Yeah.
And he was like, the little thing is ticking and it should be connecting, and it just wasn't. Anyway, randomly, after the fourth attempt, it did. Well, I finally went to my GPT after we got it connected to understand what had gone wrong.
Happening. Yeah.
Exactly. And sometimes that's what we call in education backwards by design, where we look at the end goal of a project, or perhaps it's unfortunately a goal on an exam they need to get to or something. And then you design your monthly planning, your unit planning, your weekly planning, your daily planning backwards from the end goal that you want to get to. And you want to match into each of those parts an experience that's going to help them remember. Well, trust me, I can't remember the last time I spent so much time trying to connect a printer ever in all my experiences, right? So I'll always remember that. But it's an interesting use case equally for AI, right? In that we don't always have to go to it first. It's important to have creative struggles sometimes. You don't always have to just choose to get the answer first. And the second interesting thing from the example, and this was the first time I'd ever done it just a couple days ago, but to share with everybody who's listening, is that once you've done the struggle and you can ask it to help you understand what went wrong, or what can I take away, or what can I do to improve that process so that I can do it faster next time. It doesn't have to be just to give you the answer, but to help you analyze, you know?
Yeah. Like it's like having a tutor, an at-hand tutor in a sense. So if you were, those almost feel like tips. So I always do tips. I think you've given us 2 tips here, right? One is choose to work on, solve a problem, and then ask GPT or search online after when you've done the cracking of the problem, right? And the second one that you just offered, I don't know how to put that into words. Would you happen to have a third tip that you might offer in that context?
In the context, I would offer the same visually, and some people listening to your podcast episode may disagree with me, and I think that's healthy and that is okay, but I'd like to offer it as something that I believe is valuable for my own practice and may help others, is when you're stuck on trying to visualize an icon for something that you don't know in visual thinking, for example, try the creative struggle is important. So take a couple rounds, give yourself a 5-minute timer, try to sketch a couple of things like crazy eights and product build. When you can't come up with it, you could use a GPT to ask you to give it advice on suggestions, but don't ask it to give you the images of it. You could ask it to give you the text so that it's not inputting the images into your mind. You're reading the words, and your imagination based on your learned context from your life experiences may help you visualize something. Did that make sense, or should I try to re-explain?
No, that's perfectly. I totally understand that you, rather than give me 10 icons, it's like, give me words for other metaphors that I could use for this concept. Okay, I didn't think about that concept. What would that look like? And then you draw it, and now it becomes more of a partnership, right? It's basically breaking through your lack of depth of knowledge around a metaphor and bringing others to mind that maybe you haven't thought of before, maybe ever. But then you still do the work of actually visualizing the thing. right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And a little bit like text. The other half of that tip is a little bit like text. So perhaps you may have written a story or an essay and you'd like the GPT to help you with your grammar and structures. It may be the same as an image. And this where some visual thinkers, sketchnote artists may disagree with me, and that's fine. Feel free. But you may input your own sketch note into a GPT and ask it to give you feedback, a little bit like a coach or a mentor.
Yeah.
So a little bit like me sending a sketch note to Mike and say, Mike, could you give me some things that you'd like me to improve on? It's the same with a sketch note. You're not asking the GPT to recreate your sketch note. You're asking it for feedback, right? And so that could be an alternative way too.
Yeah.
Just a little note on that for those who want to take my advice. Please remember your data. If you're going to put your sketch note into a GPT like OpenAI that is not a lockdown enterprise version or a school version, then that will go into the training model. So just make sure before you decide to upload your data, including your own illustrations, that it is locked down for yourself if that's what you want.
Yeah. Good. That's a good point. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I just really hadn't planned on talking so much about education and having so much fun, but it's been a blast. And it's got me excited about wanting to reach back out to teachers and school districts and seeing maybe now that things have, settled down a little bit from the pandemic, that there's an opportunity to do some more traveling. Because I really enjoyed traveling. I love to travel. And then being able to teach too is like a double win, right? So makes me think maybe I should be pursuing some school districts again and doing some teaching and maybe offering some things. So thanks for that inspiration.
Thank you for having me. It's not always equally, and back at you, Mike. I don't always find people that have the tech background and passion for techie stuff like me who are also visual thinkers. It's one of the biggest reasons, like, I love listening to your podcast, and it's been great having chats with you when we connect at ISC every year, because it's nice to be able to just go through all the things and know that you get what I'm talking about. So yeah, thank you for this lovely conversation for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And so, Georgina, where is the best place or the best places for people to find you?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm on Substack. I'm on there a lot right now. It seems to be a beautiful creative hub for us. And I know you're on there too, Mike. So I'm at Wonder with Georgina, and I'll share, if I haven't already, the links for those with
We'll put
you
links
on
in.
Substack and IG. Instagram is Wonder with Georgina. I'm not really on X anymore, but I'm at Redefine Ed if you are there. And Blue Sky, as well, Redefine Ed. LinkedIn, I'm there for corporate. So if you're interested in doing some work together for your business or digital transformation, or bringing me into visually sketchnote, or do conferences or meetings, etc., then you can find me on LinkedIn with my name. And the most exciting thing, I guess, if I may just throw that out there for anybody who might be interested, I finally found a little membership space for myself that I'm really excited. So I've always been a huge fan of reading ever since I was a little girl. Sherlock Holmes book, Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys, all the things. And then visual thinking, how can I combine those? So I've created the Visual Chapter Book Club, and I'm really excited. It's a bring your own book club, a little bit like bring your own device from school. Excuse me. So everybody brings their own book, and what we're doing is we're sketchnoting the books out together, and we meet once a month to share. And it's a way to inspire other people to rekindle their love of reading and share the books that we're reading together. But it's equally a deeper creative practice that we can share in community space. So there's 3 tracks to get started. If somebody is new to visual thinking, they can take the quote collector, where they just want to sort of sketch out a quote from a chapter and do that monthly. There's also the character catcher. So you're focusing on just a character development if it's a fiction book, for example, and map out the character's journey. Or there's the chapter mapper. And so you could do a chapter a month, or you could do a whole book. Like it's really whatever you want it to be. Read 5 books in a month if you want and sketchnote them. But I've got these 3 tracks to help people get started if they don't know where to start. And we are in a beta right now. We're just finishing up the first month at the end of this week, actually. And it's on fire. You know, you can relate to this, Mike, because you are on Substack now as well. Some chat spaces are really hard to get going, whether it's Slack or, Substack or whatever it is. But my chat is going like every week, people talking about the stationery they want to use, the tools, what they're reading, the character. So it's really lovely practice to see the community coming together. So if anybody is interested, we're doing the full launch in September and the doors open at the end of July. So you're welcome to subscribe to the newsletter to get all the updates on that. But if you love reading or would like to get back into it and love visual things, then this is definitely a space for you.
And is there a URL that someone should go to go see the details of that?
Absolutely. And I sent it to you in the show notes. It's experience.georginadean.com/VCBC for Visual Chapter Book Club. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but I sent the link.
We'll put a link in the show notes. Yeah, for sure. We always do that as a follow-up to this. So.
And we must absolutely, Mike, since you are started this with other people, shout out to Verona next month. Are you excited?
Yep. I'm very excited. We're coming in pretty quickly, and all my plans are set up, and I'm excited to see what that's going to be like. I'm sure Verona is going to be a beautiful city. If you're listening to this and you are kind of curious what this is, it's an international sketchnote camp. It started in 2017, almost 10 years ago, by 4 women that just felt like we should have a physical gathering. And it just has continued because the community is so vibrant. At the end of every event, someone stands up and says, we're bringing it to this city. And it's happened again and again to the point where I just expect someone's going to stand up and take it. Like, it's funny. The first few times my assumption was, well, that was really fun. Probably the last one, like the Dread Pirate Roberts, Dread Pirate Roberts, he'll probably kill you in the morning, but he never does. Right. And so it's always continued through many cities. It's survived through the pandemic, which is a huge indicator of community strength. And this year it's in Verona. Very reasonably priced, I think, for what's offered. It's a weekend, so it's not a super commitment. If you're in Europe, very accessible. If you're outside of Europe, it's a little bit more of a commitment, but doable. Go to Sketchnote Lab, and you can find links to it. I think I've posted on sketchnotearmy.substack.com as well. But then you can also just do a search for International Sketchnote Camp Verona, and you'll find the information for that. So, for sure, I think the very first episode released in this season of the podcast is also with Claudio and Federica, who are 2 of the organizers, right? So you can hear a little bit more of their passion and what their plans are for it if you go back to that podcast episode, which is a good reminder, since we're talking about show notes, to make sure that I link to that in the show notes so you can go back and jump back. So, yes, I'm excited. I can't wait to see everybody, including you, and be with my community again. So, exciting stuff. Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, it's very addictive. If you're listening to this podcast episode and you've never been to one, like my first one was in San Antonio, Texas a couple of years ago. And like, I hope to never miss a year ever. Like, the people are just unlike any other community.
Unique.
It's super unique. Everybody has something to offer. There's no limit on skill level, like beginners to pros. We all learn from each other. It's incredible. Honestly, it's a trip of a lifetime every year, and don't miss it, guys, if you're listening.
Yeah, that's for sure. Find it. Well, Georgina, thanks for being on the show. Thanks everyone who's listening or watching. It's another episode of the podcast, coming up on 200 of these. So until the next time, this is Mike Rohde and Georgina signing off for another episode. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
To support the creation of this show, I invite you to buy one of my books, the Sketchnote Handbook or the Sketchnote Workbook. You can find the books on Amazon, or go to peachpit.com and use the code ROHDE40 for 40% off. Please share this podcast with other visual thinking friends, and be sure to leave a nice rating on iTunes or your favorite podcast listening app so others can find the show.